Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We are here for round 3 of 5 at Epic Loot in Centerville, Ohio. We are Dayton Magic Club. We recommend you check us out at DaytonMagicClubWebsite.com. Check out Epic Loot at Epic Loot Games. They've been gracious enough to host us here. It's a great store. We have 46 players here tonight for standard.
40. That's a good number.
That's a reasonable size FNM. We are paying out to record. 5-0 gets $50 in store credit, and it kind of pays down from there. 3 and 2 gets a pack. So between there and $50 is what everyone is playing for tonight.
Can't argue with that.
Absolutely. I am Ryan Johnson here in the booth with first-time commentator
Robert Holt.
Thank you for joining us. We have, for round 3 feature match, you've seen him on our camera before if you've watched our broadcast. We have Logan Dice. This is table 1. Both players are undefeated going into this round. Logan, a noted mono red aggro player, also noted he's like 11 years old. Hasn't been playing Magic very long, picked up mono red.
He actually, I believe he top 18 to few Star City games.
Yeah, he has 2 or 3
opens,
cast finishes, a top 16 and then 2 top 32s.
Yeah, so he's definitely good with mountains.
Absolutely.
We'll just put it that way. He's good with mountains.
We don't know if he's on mono red tonight. He very well could be, but also he has recently played to some success mono blue, the old mono blue from the previous format that was considered to be one of the top decks of the format, the devotion list. So he could be on that as well, which would be interested to see how it stacks up against sort of these new decks.
Yeah.
His opponent, Brian Mead, don't know what he's on either. So we'll see how that develops as the match goes on.
I don't have any information on what Brian Mead's playing, and I can just only guess what Logan's playing based on knowing Logan.
Were I a betting man, I would say Logan's on mountains, but he's been stretching the range a little bit.
Definitely.
So, in the room tonight, I noticed there's a fair amount of the decks you would expect to be popular.
I've seen some Abzan.
Yep.
We saw a little bit of Mardu last round, and I actually enjoyed that Mardu deck quite a bit. It wasn't full blown mid range where they were going with just Sarkins and Butchers, and that was about it. It actually had some Bloodsoaked Champions and a Rabblemaster, and I actually enjoyed that quite a bit.
I like it.
And in round 1, we saw a nice Saltide Delve list going Ether Spouts into Villainous Wealth. That was actually very interesting, and Hornet Queen to take it home.
Yep, very cool stuff tonight.
Seen some really good matches tonight.
So hopefully this one stacks up. I think we saw Logan 2 weeks ago on camera, and he was soundly defeated by an Abzan deck. It's one of the things that the mono red players have been concerned about is how good Siege Rhino is.
Siege Rhino's good, and it's not even Siege Rhino. It's the 2-drop Sylvan Caryatid, the 3-drop Corsair Crewfix into Siege Rhino that makes the deck a serious problem.
An incredibly hostile curve.
Yeah.
And we saw that happen on camera twice in a row 2 weeks ago, where the mid-range decks just squeezed out the aggro decks.
Yeah, I got to give a little bit of credit to Tom Ross, though. He, no matter what the format looks like, he just doesn't care.
Yep, he won Louisiana States with a very low-to-the-ground mono-red aggro.
He'll take those mountains and those cheap 1-drops all the way home for sure. And, that's the one thing that aggro does have in its advantage in this metagame, is primarily the fact that a lot of these 3-colored mid-range decks are going to fumble around with their mana base quite a bit in the first 3 turns of the game, just trying to get things set up.
Yep,
so
exactly.
If aggro can squeeze in those first 3 turns without fumbling itself, then it's got a good shot at putting the game away, just based on that fact.
The burn is good. Stoke the Flames is a very powerful Magic card.
Incinerate, definitely.
Yeah.
I think we're on Incinerate 3.0 at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's still 2 mana instant, 3 damage.
Yep. So the tools are there.
The tools are there.
I like the double splash for Butcher the Horde myself. Gives you a tool to punch through these ground stalls.
Yeah.
Looks like Brian Mead.
5/4 flying. Can't go wrong.
Yeah.
No drawbacks except for the casting cost. No drawbacks.
Looks like Brian may have been on Jeskai. I may have caught a glimpse of some Jeskai looking cards in his hand. So that might be true. I wouldn't swear to it. Logan seems pretty content with his hand. Brian threw his back very quickly. So we will certainly see if he... Oh, almost caught a glimpse of Logan's hand. But here we'll see how he likes his That's a mountain.
I did see the mountain.
Oh, Logan is on mono red tonight.
All right.
And I know that if he's playing the initial mono red list he's been sticking with, it's a very Tom Ross, very low to the ground, down and dirty, heroic red list. It's not a big Rabble Master, Ashcloud Phoenix, Sarkin list.
Right, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe Tom Ross has even eschewed Rabble Master in favor of Hordling Outburst.
Yeah.
Primarily because it plays so well with Swift Spear.
Not a bad start.
And then the pump spells.
From Logan here. One drop, which is about as good of a start as he could want. Brian looking at his hand and saying maybe a little slow out the gate to deal with this. And that's very possible that as the format sort of ebbs and flows, we may see the decks overcompensate for these big mid-range decks that don't do much on the first 3 turns,
right,
and be a little more vulnerable to this deck that does this on the first 3 turns. That's a Magma Jet on the Foundry Street Denizen, which was the biggest guy on the board. So, what are the 2 identical cards there in the front, Jacob?
Actually, we believe the third one there as well.
Yeah, the heroic, the Hoplite guy that gets +1/+1 counter.
Okay.
So he has 3 of them. Very vulnerable to Bile Blight. Doesn't look like he's going to see it. This is another Mardu deck.
I gotta say, I like the way Mardu plays out in this format. You know,
I thought it might be Jeskai because I saw the red-white duels, but no, it is another Mardu deck, another Mardu Rebel Master deck.
Mardu has all the tools to take a game all the way from start to finish.
Absolutely, I agree. But Logan certainly came out strong. His guys are all small, but boy, there are plenty of them. Brian looks like he is strongly considering blocking with Rabble Master.
I agree, and I would hate to see what happens if Brian can pull out an Anger of the Gods here. I'm not sure if he's running it, but that'd be bad news for Logan, because I believe at this point Logan has down to 1 card in his hand.
Yep.
So
I believe some of the Mardu decks do play Anger of the Gods, but I don't know if those versions also play Rabble Master.
You know, it's kind of a toss-up. Do you go Rabble Master and get the card advantage out of the additional tokens Rabble Master makes, or do you try and clean up your opponent's aggressive creatures and Sylvan Caryatids and so on and so forth with Anger of the God? So, additionally, Rabble Master being a single red plays a lot better with the mana base that you have to cobble together with these decks as opposed to the double red for Anger.
So Brian is aggressively blocking with Rabble Master. Now, that was blocking a smaller guy. Now, Brian's at 11 and is fairly stabilized here. Does Logan have the tools to punch through these last 11 points of damage is the question.
1 card in hand, I got to say it's not looking good.
He might just be getting out. He might be getting outraced by this Rabble Master.
I think Rabble Master is doing its $20 worth.
Yeah.
So...
If Brian is a Butcher of the Horde, then this game is basically over on the spot, unless Logan... Nope, Logan doesn't even have Stoke the Flames as an option.
I could even see a land into Sarkin here being a really good play.
Depending on how big he goes.
Yeah. Not to deal with the creatures or anything, but just to get a dragon on the board and start swinging and leave the Rabble Master back to damage. So. Rabble Master has the ability by itself to swing for 4.
Yep.
And plus the tokens is an additional 2 damage.
So he has the option of swinging out for 10 if he in fact does have a Sarkin.
Right.
And that puts Logan pretty firmly on the back foot, and again, without a whole lot of tools to
yeah,
recover.
If Brian goes ahead and taps out for the swing here, Logan does have a good possibility of 10 damage is not all that uncommon for this deck to do in 1 turn. So this is one of those times though where Stoke the Flames is not at its greatest.
No, I agree.
Because he wants to get the attack in, but at the same time he would need the additional convoke creatures.
Exactly. Brian's life total is a little high for Stoke to really be at its finest. So we're going to combat. And we're going just swinging for a lot.
Yes. I believe we got 5 off Rabble Master and 3 off the tokens. 8 damage is going to put Logan down to 9 life.
Yep, which is a 1-turn clock.
Right.
I think Brian did the math there and realized there was no reason to commit anything else on the board.
Yeah, and he's got 5 open mana, so given a couple cards in hand, all it takes is 1 or 2 burn spells to keep Logan off his game plan.
Logan plays a mountain, doing some math, trying to count to 10.
I gotta wonder what his game plan is here, because it's not blocking. So he's got to just turn his guy sideways and see if he can get there based on what he's got in his hand.
He's leaving 1 guy back. Here, Brian is clearing some room.
I'm thinking Mardu Charm. Yes.
Yes,
We have
it
a
is.
Mardu Charm. We're gonna make 2/1/1 first strike tokens, and we're gonna put up some blockers and save that damage, and probably.
That probably does. That's probably it. Oh yeah, Foundry Street Denizen. Not real good here.
Now, what I would like to see from Brian here, I don't know if he's got it, don't even know if he's running it, but this is where I would love to just see a Sorin come down.
Yeah.
Just give those guys +1/+0 and lifelink and just put this game away.
I'll tell you, I've been fairly impressed with how the Mardu decks have been performing on camera here.
And there seems to be a pretty good range of them, too. You can go all the way down from your very aggressive lists. Unfortunately, they have a bad mana base, but, you can even go into your kind of your mid-range / aggressive all the way to mid-range and control. It's got Mardu has the ability to play the entire spectrum from aggro to control.
I know that the longtime DMC affiliate Derek Dyer.
Yeah, he's all the way on the control side of it.
Playing,
I believe he has
one creature in his deck. It's a Zurgo Helm Smasher.
Yeah, and 4 Sarkans.
He told me the reason he's playing Zurgo is you can't play 5 Sarkans.
Exactly, yeah. But you could play an Elspeth.
Brian
is playing Elspeth.
Brian swung out there. Probably
Seeker of the Way.
Could have had the kill there if he wanted it.
Seeker of the Way being a good play here, save him some life if it becomes relevant, and actually it's not going to be relevant because we're going to game 2.
Yep. Game could have been over last turn, but it was pretty academic.
Yeah.
Logan was pretty much out of gas. Now, Logan's deck is designed to get under the format. It's designed to put in for those first 10 points of damage by your opponent's turn 3 before their lands are all untapped and they start casting their big 3, 4, 5 curves. Right. And then finishing them out with some Stoke the Flames.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe sneaking the last couple of points with some the Arena Athlete, making some big guys can't block. Sneaking a couple points, some Stokes.
I think the problem you're going to see here from, on the mono red side of the table is that the Mardu player has access to Butcher.
Yep.
On top of which, Sorin, if he's running it.
Yep.
And then additionally, we saw from Brian's deck that he's also playing Seeker of the Way.
Yep.
So
Seeker of the Way in the main deck bodes ill, I think, for Logan after sideboard.
Yeah. He's got enough. He's got enough life gain in his 60 cards to definitely keep up with the mono red player.
And we saw that Rabblemaster there against these 1/1s and 2/1s could make a token and then trade, or make a token and then block, and allowed Brian to keep the pressure on Logan while also blocking for a couple of turns. So we saw the Rabblemaster, which is a very aggressive card, against these hyper aggro decks where a 2/2 body is about as big as anything on the board, can actually help stabilizing the board.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think Logan's in a little trouble. He certainly has the tools to beat these mid-range decks. He certainly goes into this format knowing that the big green decks are kind of the deck to beat.
I was actually pretty impressed with the way Mardu Charm played there. It gave him the ability as just a main deck card. If you're playing against something like Abzan, you can just take out a relatively decent-sized guy.
Yeah.
Or if you're playing against something like, a mono-red aggro deck, you can just make a couple 1/1 first striking tokens.
Yep.
And put away a couple of their one casting cost creatures pretty quickly. So,
very much so.
Definitely a good range in Mardu Charm. Definitely a good range.
Certainly overperforming my expectations for it.
So what's the third mode on Mardu Charm?
It's make 2 tokens, deal 4 damage to a creature.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure.
And I just played it a couple weeks ago, and it's slipping my mind also.
Logan opens up with a 1-drop. Reasonably happy with that. Brian may have... Oh, he has a Swift Spear.
The third mode on Mardu Charm being an instant speed duress, which actually
yep.
I didn't remember that off the top of my head, but that actually is very relevant in a control matchup.
Yeah, very much so. Logan plays Titan Strength on his upkeep, which we see these decks do when they
need to get that 1 scry in there. So they know they got an open attack.
So Brian's deck is very aggressive. We saw Swift Spear and Seeker of the Way, which are aggressive drops. We see how sort of
he wants to be casting spells every turn. Once he gets his Swift Spear and Seeker of the Way on the board, he wants to cast spells every turn. And Mardu Charm just plays right into that strategy.
Absolutely. Because it gives you, and then we see...
Searing Blood.
Nice one. Searing Blood is a nice one. I don't think Logan starts a ton of them, but certainly after what he saw that game with Rabble Masters and Seeker of the Ways,
you have to kill the Rabble Master and get in that a few additional points of damage.
Absolutely. Very good stuff. It's a very powerful magic card.
If I could go Searing Blood into Crackling Doom, I think that would be the best day ever.
Oh man, that sounds so good. Give something to think about. I've been tinkering with a Mardu shell for a while. I've never been 100% happy with it, but
there's nothing better than cures and hitting them for damage in the same the same spell. So
you get a lot of options to do that in standard now. So Logan committing some more pressure to the board.
It's like another Swift Spear.
Yep. And
the Legacy Open Champion Monastery Swift Spear.
Yes, indeed. Very powerful magic card.
Week 1.
Logan making a ton of guys off his Akroan Crusader. Now, this is a much more explosive start from Logan than we saw before.
Exactly.
Brian has a removal spell of some sort, and we're thinking... What was the spell there?
Deflecting
Palm. Okay. Deflecting Palm, not super good against Logan's deck.
Not at that point in the game.
It's important.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say it's important to remember with Reflecting Palm, because it's different than a lot of times that effect has been printed before.
Mm-hmm.
Deflecting Palm does not let you redirect the damage as you choose.
Right.
It redirects damage coming to you.
Right. Unfortunately,
to the opposing player.
Unfortunately, it's not Harm's Way, which
it's
is what
that's
what we all wanted it to be.
We all wanted it to be Harm's Way or the white.
Yeah, so it just deals it back to the Sorcerer's Controller, and unfortunately, when you get in these aggro matches, something like Harm's Way,
1/1s and 2/1s,
being able to redirect that damage back to a creature, they always call it the White Shock for a reason, because you could just pop those little.
I play it in Zoo in Modern.
Yeah, it's definitely a good card.
The white shoal, the white fireball. Yeah.
I'm kind of curious as to what Brian's game plan is here, because if I was the Mardu player, this is where I would want to be bringing in, some level of Anger the Gods.
Sure.
And it looks from the way Brian's deck is constructed, that he is definitely being more aggressive with his creatures. He's got Monastery Swift Spear. He's got Seeker of the Way. So I don't anticipate him bringing in Anger of the Gods. So
I agree.
He's going to have another game plan to deal with Logan's aggressive 1-drops. And I'm thinking it might just actually be Bile Blight. Or
if he's got enough black to support it.
Bile
Blight would have been very good there.
Yes, I'm thinking, in that case, it would have taken out a couple Swift Spears or possibly the tokens that were created off the Crusader. So.
What we saw game 1 was Logan's deck looked like just a bad mono red aggro deck. Game 2, we saw the full-fledged heroic engine in action that just really put that game away very quickly and was resilient to Brian's 1-for-1 big clunky removal spells.
Exactly.
I would be in a hurry to get those Deflecting Palms out of there if I were him.
Yeah, and I would be in a hurry to effectively deal with 1 and 2 drops and then be able to get the Mardu Charm tokens on the board, because the Mardu Charm tokens did a lot of work game 1.
Absolutely.
I could see those playing a big part here in game 3.
Now, Brian's land is
Mana Confluence. I got to say, I'm probably not too excited to see Mana Confluence if I'm Brian right now. Going into Seeker of the Way, it's not terrible. It's going to offset the life loss from Mana Confluence.
Absolutely. So, assuming Logan doesn't have a quick removal spell like he did last game.
Exactly.
Now, Logan should be at probably a lower life total.
I believe that's Magma Spray we saw from Brian on turn 1. That's actually a really big play.
Absolutely.
So keeping the mono red player off of those early creatures is crucial, especially when you follow it up with a 2-drop like Seeker of the Way.
Untapping on turn 3 at 19 life is really good.
You can't argue with that. So
now Logan could have a Searing Blood here, which should be probably his best possible play. He looks conflicted.
And I can't see Brian's hand here, but I do got to say, if he did board in Bile Blight, he can cast it.
Yep. It's an Arena Athlete out of Logan. A powerful card against these Siege Rhino type decks.
Can you refresh my memory on what that does?
That's the heroic one that when heroic is activated, a creature can't block.
Gotcha.
It's really good against the decks that have they want to go curve like 3, 4, 5.
Okay.
Because they don't flood the board with blockers. They play like one big blocker, like a Courser of Prefix, and then you just punch right through it.
All right.
So very powerful. It competed with the one from Ravnica that creatures can't block, Firefish Striker.
Okay.
But in the heroic decks, got the nod because you could blow them out with like a triple heroic enable turn, and just they can't block and they're dead.
Swing all out, no blockers. Gotcha.
Yep. So Logan, it looked to me like he may have been wrestling with deploying a removal spell or developing his board. He's shuffling his hand too fast for me to confirm if that's true. Is that a? I don't know what that is in his hand. Is it a Hall of Triumph?
It looks like a Hall of Triumph.
Could be. It looks like an artifact. Yep. So it looks like he was attempting to develop the board, play Hall, and try to get ahead of this this Seeker. But we're going to see removal spell into a Seeker attack, which basically is Brian's game plan for as long as that Seeker is alive.
Yep. You need to get that lifelink damage in there.
Absolutely.
And, stay ahead of the curve. Especially with that Mana Confluence on board, hitting you for 1 every turn.
Yep. So. Logan serves in. A little more of a poke.
So it looks like Logan's got down to about 3 cards in hand.
Yep.
Now down
There's
to 2.
That's an Eidolon.
Eidolon of the Great Revel.
Now Eidolon could be very good here.
Yeah, at this point in the game, though, Brian's still at 19 life.
Yep.
It might actually hurt Logan at this point in the game more than it'll hurt Brian, just because everything in Logan's deck is gonna be affected by Eidolon, whereas Brian probably has some spells that he can cast that he's not gonna take damage.
Sure.
So
if Logan had developed a little more explosively and Brian was at 12 or so, that Eidolon starts to look a lot better.
Right. But I gotta wonder. I believe if now he's going for 5, so we're probably gonna see a Sarkin. Oh well. No, Wingmate Rock.
Wingmate Rock with Raid.
Perfect.
That is a powerful card. I will say that, I agree with Patrick Sullivan who talks about aggressive decks. I'm not wild about my aggressive decks having a curve from 1 to 6. It leads to some inconsistent draws.
1 to 5 is not bad, though.
Yeah.
But, no, it still definitely leads you in inconsistent draws. But this is one of those cases we were talking about, earlier in round 1, where being able to kind of catch back up or break the parity between you and your opponent plays a huge role. And not to mention the fact that as long as the Wingmate Rock Prime stays on the board, not the bird token itself, but as long as Wingmate Rock stays on the board, you get that additional life gain every time you attack.
Absolutely. The thing that this format reminds me of right now, obviously this format's very young, is the Thragtusk format.
Mm-hmm.
The aggressive decks, almost all of them switched over to big beatdown decks with like Falconwrath Aristocrats and Thunderball Hellkites because they had to fly over these big ground stalls.
Right.
And I know that I played Red Black Zombies when that was a deck, and then we switched over to a deck that was Chandra's Phoenix into Falconwrath Aristocrat was the plan, and you could just fly over. And Wingmate Rock kind of does something similar to the Thundermaw Hellkite engine, where you just be like, well, the ground's clogged up, we've been brawling for a while, here's my big flyer.
I'll tell you, one of the things I'm excited about in a Mardu deck is being able to utilize the instant speed ability on Mardu Charm to make 2 tokens, and then throw one of them at your opponent next turn just to enable raid and get the Wingmate Rock on the board.
Yep, I agree. Very powerful. So Logan's in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be sitting on Logan's side of the table at this point in the game. Those are some big Wingmate Rocks, and the additional life gain off of Wingmate Rock and Seeker of the way is going to make it very hard for Logan to activate his main game plan to finish his game off. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe Brian has another Wingmate Rock in hand, and he's about to cast it.
Yeah, that's tough. that's a tough situation.
Logan is 7, Brian at 14, and again, I don't want to call him too early.
Yep.
But I'd probably be picking him up right here.
Yeah. The thing that I played the heroic red deck for a while. I like red decks. I try to sample them all. I found it to be a little fragile. It was really vulnerable to what we saw here, which was just like 1 or 2 early pieces of disruption, not even a ton. It's enough to kind of break up what you're doing and turn your really focused, synergy-driven thing to just kind of a pile of cards.
Yeah, and one of the things I got to give Brian a little credit for at this point in the game was, like we talked about earlier, if you're the mono red player, you're kind of banking on the fact that your opponent just dirtles around with their mana base early in the game. And as we can see on Brian's side of the board, he's got a Plains, Looks like a couple swamps and a mana confluence. So he didn't have a problem with his mana base.
Nope.
It might have cost him a few life, but he made that up with Secret of the Wind.
Absolutely.
So.
And we see the game reach its inevitable conclusion. Logan Dice defeated 2-1 by Brian Mead.
So if you had to pick, on Brian's side of the table, if you had to pick a card that just kind of represent his deck that put those games away, what would you pick?
That's a good question. We saw Secret of the Way do some work. Wingmate Rock looked very good. Mardu Charm was a very effective card.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I think Wingmate Rock definitely took game 2, and I think it might not have been the most obvious swing in tempo from one side of the board to the other game 1, but I think Mardu Charm actually switched the tempo in game 1.
Yeah, I
just
agree.
By creating those 2/1/1 first strike blockers,
Yep.
and you essentially had a one-sided Wrath was what happened there.
Absolutely. No, we saw the flexibility and the power of that card. His deck is very interesting. It's similar to the deck we saw previously, but certainly more aggressive. You want to it has the option of going like Swift Spear, Secret of the Way, Rabble Master, Butcher. Though I don't know if we ever saw a Butcher.
Did we? I don't think we saw a Butcher. I think we anticipated game 1, but I don't think we ever saw it. And
I'm assuming it's there, but it's possible Wingmate Rock is like in that slot.
It's possible, but given the fact that he is running Rabble Master and Mardu Charm, I gotta say I'm still. I would be running Butcher. Yeah, I would be running it. So not saying he is. And I think one card we didn't see that I was also anticipating was Sorin.
Yep.
When you're running those little guys and you got a couple ways to make tokens, the Sorin's definitely a good card there. And it's possible he even had him in the board and boarded him in just for the additional life gain.
Sure.
We just
it would have been a very powerful effect.
I think the one card on Logan's side of the table that I was most disappointed in was Eidolon of the Great Revel. And, the card is absolutely hands down amazing in Modern and Legacy, where your curves are much lower. But you get into something like Standard, after the board's been deployed and your opponent has 4 or 5 lands on their side of the table, the card just doesn't do a whole lot when they start dropping 4 and 5 drops.
It was definitely a powerful card at the end of the last format.
Right.
It was very effective against Divination. And a
lot of the removal spells in blue-white.
Yeah, exactly. Which was one of the big boogeyman of the format there.
Right.
Just chip-shotting him, keeping him in range so that you could kill him before Sphinx Revolution came online. In this new Brave New World of 3-color mid-range decks, it might not be as powerful.
Quite possibly, it's just maybe a little too slow, and
you
may be looking for something more that's got a higher power. As a 2-drop, maybe something that does a little bit more damage, and maybe bring an Eidolon in against, maybe just like one, niche matches.
Seems like he'd be good against the Jeskai deck.
Yes, I agree with that. They have a lot of cheap spells in that deck and just a couple finishers. So.
But there we go. That was round 3 in the books.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. We appreciate you guys. Brian Mead winning that one 2-1 over Logan Dice. Once again, we are Dayton Magic Club coming at you live. Friday Night Magic, 46 players here at Epic Loot tonight, 5 rounds of standard action, and hopefully the Modern tournament just kicked off, so hopefully we'll...
hopefully we can catch the last round of Modern once we wrap up these 5 rounds of standard, but we're definitely staying online for all 5 rounds of standard, and potentially seeing Brian Mead show up in round 4.
Absolutely,
so, he's going to be 3-0 at this point.
Really interested to see these Mardu decks and how they're shaping up. Something we didn't really see at the Pro Tour. I think there's a lot of power in that.
I don't know how our round 1 player did, but I'd be interested in seeing the Mardu versus Sultai match.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be a cool one.
Aetherspouse.deck was definitely a favorite of mine for the evening. So.
Absolutely. So, once again, thanks for joining us. Be sure to come back and check us out for round 4 as we start to see how this tournament is sort of shaping up towards its conclusion.
We're seeing some of the big players in the metagame for sure.
All right.
So,
thanks a lot, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Round 4 of 5, live from Epic Loot here in Centerville, Ohio. We are Dayton Magic Club. I am Ryan Johnson. I'm in the booth with
Robert Holt.
And we want to thank you for joining us. What we have right now is local area level 2 judge Matt Farney playing against Russell Careless. This is table 2. Both players are undefeated, vying for going undefeated into round 5.
Yep, so we are 3-0 at this point.
So I don't know what either player's on. 46 players in the room tonight makes it hard to really lock in what everybody's playing.
Right, and we don't have a deck list to go off of.
So we'll develop. That'll develop as we go along here. Certainly some interesting decks we've seen under camera tonight, and we're getting updated from our table spotter. About what is going on here. Oh yeah, that's right. I almost forgot about that.
Yeah, back in looks like I think 2010, Farney was I think he got second at an SCG Standard Open playing mono black vampires, if I remember correctly.
I think it was black red vampires.
Black red vampires. Okay, yeah. He was. I definitely remember him on vampires, and if I'm not mistaken, he wrote a tournament report after that and posted it to StarCityGames.com, so you could actually go out there and look up Matt Farney and see an article that he wrote regarding the tournament report. So
certainly a very accomplished player, a big part of the local community. Like I said, he's the area level 2 judge. Was part of the founding of the original Dayton Magic Club when we were at Wright State Magic Club at the student union at Wright State years and years ago. So accomplished and a long-time part of the scene.
It looks like Matt Farney, I'm just going to go ahead and throw it out there, is probably on Saltai of some sort, given the fact that we got a Yavimaya Coast and a Swamp on the board.
Yeah, I'm willing to believe that is true.
And a Sylvan Caryatid means he's probably going to follow it up with a pretty good 4-drop. And Russell looks like he's maybe a little too early to call it. I'm not quite sure. It looks like we have Jess. I'm going to just go ahead and say Jeskai Burn at this point. It could be something different.
Well, that is Murderous Cut Doomwake Giant Civic Wayfinder. So this is the black-green devotion type deck.
Okay.
With the Doomwake Giant, which is a big player in block.
Yep.
And certainly a very powerful Magic card. They was a little outclassed by the powerful endgame that something like Blue-White Control had in the last format.
And Commune with I believe Commune with the Gods is the card that he's probably going to be running to search up creatures and enchantments.
Yeah, absolutely, and get that engine.
Yeah,
get that engine
and Commune with the Gods is important to point out that after you look at your top 5 cards and whatever you don't take ends up in your graveyard. So if he's running any sort of delve cards, I believe he's going to be able to take advantage of it.
So he took the Murderous Cut, which means he's more worried about his threats being disrupted than being able to answer his opponent's threats. So we'll see if his confidence is misplaced. We're seeing the Centaur Wayfinder
gonna get a land and bend a few cards.
Yep. Doing what it does best. Fixing your mana while filling up your graveyard for your delve spells. Really cool stuff. I'm a big fan of those like engine synergy driven decks.
Yep.
And this format definitely has some of them.
They seem to be delve engines. The delve engines seem to be really well.
Yeah.
Performing really well. Commune with the Gods plays very nice with being able to find your enchantment creatures and just any creature in general, actually.
And I wonder if we'll see like a Sidisi. If there's a Sidisi
I would love to see
Sidisi.
Yeah.
This is a really sweet one. And certainly very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Although I wonder, it's a really powerful engine, but I wonder if it just gets outclassed by like just how big Siege Rhino is. You know what I mean? Like one of those cards that's cool, that's powerful, that has a shell around it that just doesn't quite match up well with some of the dominant things that the format is doing.
I agree. I do like the fact that it has the potential to be a mini Grave Titan.
Oh, for sure.
But it does require some setup.
No. Okay. I was excited.
What do we have there?
That's
is that a Whip
Erebos.
of Erebos. Okay. A little bit of
so this is definitely a Sultai dredge deck.
Yes.
That we saw some teams really work on. I know for the Pro Tour, it was considered to be one of like the really like powerful synergy driven decks.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people abandoned it because of those same concerns we raised, that some of the other strategies might just be more strictly powerful. You don't
Yeah,
have to jump through all that. Like, you're jumping through a lot of hoops, and like if all that gets you is a cheap removal spell, and like you dedicate a lot of your deck space to filling up your graveyard,
right.
where other decks they just like hit 4 mana and cast Siege Rhino. Like,
Exactly.
that's just like more powerful than what you're doing. So, but we'll see. I mean, there are a lot of big payoffs. The big
Commune with the
flyer.
Gods actually gives you a lot of velocity, being able to find cards.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And help your your delve spells.
Yeah, and it really depends on how dedicated you are to the dredge mechanic. I think a light touch,
And there we go. Siege Rhino.
Here we are. Farney has been sculpting.
Yep.
He's been setting some stuff up over there, and
Russell's
like, here's
Siege
Rhino. So we'll see what strategy comes out ahead here. If Farney can leverage his stocked graveyard, he's counting it. We could see
we could see Farney just go ahead and drop Tombstalker 2.0.
Yep. Well, I think it's a really good Magic card.
I do.
I mean, Tombstalker is really good.
And the newest one.
What is it called? The name is escaping me right now.
Yeah, I don't remember.
We talked about it earlier.
Yeah,
tonight,
I know. But I do like the fact that it actually gets better as the game goes on. Whereas Tombstalker, it just does what it does. It's a 5/5 flyer. But the newer one has the ability to start nuking creatures as you fill your graveyard back up.
Absolutely. We're activating Whip. We are whipping out Sidisi. And it's going to get several triggers.
I believe it only gets one trigger.
Oh, just one trigger if
Yeah.
you... Okay, I see how that works.
Right, so just get one trigger, even though we mill 3 creatures or 2 creatures or whatever. But regardless, we're still making 2/2 tokens.
Yep, triggers again on the attack, of course. And it seems like a pretty easy block, but we get our value out of it and gain some life.
Of course.
So...
I like what I'm seeing from Farney's deck here. It's got a lot of synergy going on, but we're still running into the situation of can we deal with Siege Rhino effectively before Siege Rhino starts taking his game
Yep,
on.
I think we're going to see Treasure Cruise. Definitely would like a Murderous Cut. Murderous Cut, or any removal spell, really. I think Murderous Cut is a pretty reasonable choice, but there's other ones that are available.
Yeah.
And Farney is in really good shape. That Siege Rhino is the only thing keeping Russell from just being way behind right now.
Exactly. I'm curious
Whip is really hard
how
to
many
answer.
cards Russell has in his hand. I can't really tell from here. But I got to think that he's got some other stuff that's going to hit the board here pretty soon.
Sure.
And give Farney something else to worry about. Potentially another Siege Rhino.
Yeah. That's definitely the best case scenario if you're Russell.
Even if Russell is going Wingmate Rock here, I think Siege Rhino into double zombie is still a decent play.
Yeah.
As a Farney doesn't have really an effective way to block that.
That's true. Farney is definitely wanting Whip to do a lot of work for him here, which it certainly can do.
It's been a while since we've seen a 1-mana draw 3 in Standard.
Yeah,
so it's been about 5 years, or actually about 7 years since Laura when we saw Ancestral Vision.
Yep.
So
here's another Thoughtseize. He said, "No, I got nowhere to put my hand." Doomwake Giant still hanging out there. What else do we got? Sultai Charm.
looks like we got a Tri-Land over there on the right.
Yep.
Is that a Bioblight there, second from the left?
Yep. I'm going to take the Sultai Charm.
We got a Nyx Weaver.
Nyx
Actually, a Nyx Weaver is a really good card. Something that you don't see a whole lot of, but starting to pick up a little bit more in these these self-mill decks.
There was the self-mill deck at the end of the last format that I built and I enjoyed. Probably a little underpowered, but a lot of fun to play with Nyx Weaver.
I'm not sure, but I've seen it show up a little bit here and there in place of Courser. Now, I'm not sure if that's necessarily the strategy that Farney's on, but it does fit the same place on the curve that Courser does and provides a little bit more value if you're on the self-mill strategy.
Yep. So we whip out the Nyx Weaver and just swing in. So I'm going to block the guy that's not going to get exiled. You're going to take 6. So, winning the race right now is Matt Farney. Russell Careless kind of back-footed by Farney's ability to whip pretty much at will.
You got to love any Magic card that says whip in it.
Yeah. Well, and he's not even doing anything like whipping out something enormous, right? He's just getting value out of it. He's not like whipping out
Farney
something
very well
huge.
could just whip out something enormous. It's very possible that he's got some giant monsters in that deck there.
It's very true, but we will certainly see. There's an Elspeth, which could certainly turn the tide here a little bit.
Was that 3 tokens we saw
Yeah, he made
there?
3 tokens.
And Farney, it looks like he's got roughly 8 cards in his graveyard. So, given any delve spells, maybe another Treasure Cruise,
Sure.
or again, I still can't remember the name of the Tombstalker 2.0, but that would also be another good play here for relatively low converted mana cost.
Yeah, and I am interested in knowing if he has Heroes Downfalls.
Necropolis Fiend. There
Necropolis
we go.
Fiend. That's the one. We got there,
it.
guys.
We found it. So, thank you for waiting patiently, but the card is Necropolis Fiend.
Yeah, that's...
We still don't know if he's playing it, but that's what we've been talking about for the last several minutes.
Yeah, it'd be a good one.
Yeah, Necropolis Fiend would be very good at taking the game over. If he could get it into play, he could actually just pay full mana cost for it now. Actually, full mana cost minus looks like 1.
Wouldn't have to do much.
Yeah, and then he could use the rest of his cards in his graveyard to actually just basically kill anything that Russell happens to lay on the board. So,
chew up that Siege Rhino, fly over, kill Elspeth.
Exactly.
There's a lot of work.
Exactly.
So we'll see what his plan is here.
Yeah, he's got a lot of options. He's got almost a full grip.
Well, it's worth pointing out that Doomwake Giant is extremely good against Elspeth.
Yeah, I've actually seen the new Summoning Trap. Again, that's another one of those standard cards. It's kind of...
See the Unwritten.
Yeah, it's actually pretty good with Doomwake Giant if you can hit 2 of them.
Yep. Yeah.
I've seen a little bit of talk about that being a relatively decent play. And,
ooh, that's good. That's a Murderous Cut. Doomwake Giant clears off the tokens from Elspeth.
Yep.
Murderous Cut kills the Rhino. That makes enough creatures to swing in and pressure Elspeth.
Right. Elspeth's in a little bit of trouble here, and again, Farney's still got a decent amount of cards in his hand. Looks like 3 or 4, and Russell, I believe, also down to about 3 cards in his hand. And actually, he might have a couple more. He might be up to about 4.
Now we're going to tick Elspeth up again. I don't believe she has enough loyalty left to minus. At 3 tokens. Now the problem, of course, with getting tokens is that Farney is 1 enchantment away from just wrathing all those tokens away and finishing Elspeth off. Powerful card. Doomwake Giant's a very powerful card.
To refresh my memory on Doomwake Giant, is that whenever you lay another enchantment, so it's got the constellation mechanic, is that right?
Yes. Apparently, he made the tokens and then read Doomwake Giant that it's not just an comes into play trigger, but in fact
so
a constellation trigger.
The constellation trigger. So any additional enchantments he's got.
And it only affects your opponent's creatures. It's a really powerful effect.
A disenchant would take care of it.
That's a Hero's Downfall, which will also do the job.
Yeah.
But there's Whip. So
Whip has been a problem in this game.
Whip is a very powerful magic
2
card.
zombie tokens off Sidisi.
Yep.
He's gotten some other utility out of Whip also, just being able to at least keep pressure on the board every turn.
Absolutely.
Given his self-mill strategy.
Definitely one of the big payoffs you get for playing one of these self-mill decks is
Yeah.
the ability to really turn on the full power of Whip.
Yeah, agreed. I completely agree.
Which we saw was a very good card with no synergy, just it costs 2 black mana. Yeah, exactly. But when you're dedicating so much of your deck space to stocking your graveyard with powerful effects.
Farney going up to 37 life.
Oh, what we had here was a Nyx Weaver sacking it using its second ability to return a card from your graveyard.
And it looks like the score is 37-9.
Yeah.
So again, Farney's in good shape. Still got several cards in his hand, and Russell's got to get something going here, or else he's just going to let Farney get too far ahead. Not in life, but just in board presence.
Yeah. You know that you're in trouble when untapping with Elspeth isn't enough anymore.
Yeah.
You need to find something else because untapping with Elspeth is not going to do it.
Right.
There's a Doomwake Giant still in the graveyard. They can be whipped out.
Clear those tokens out of the way and swing in with your 2/2 zombie tokens again.
Yep.
And I believe actually Doomway John will go ahead and swing too because it'll
Yep.
have haste if he whips it back into play.
Cool deck. We've seen a couple cool ones under the.
Yeah. You know, we saw that Sultai deck round 1 that was doing some fun things with ether spouts and villainous
Now
wealth.
that's a pretty good one.
Yeah.
That's a Johnny. A good friend of Elspeth's.
Yeah, Johnny will do some work to provide Russell the much-needed card advantage to match what Farney's been doing up to this point.
Yep. It also lets him get potentially Elspeth tokens out of Doomwake Giant range. Although I think that were I him at this point, you start digging with it, right? Like you just want to find more.
You know, at this point, making your Elspeth tokens a little bit larger is probably not going to get you anything. Looking at the top 4 cards of your library and revealing an aura or planeswalker.
Or creature.
Or a creature, yeah, we all 3 of those. You know, at this point in the game, though, I'm kind of curious as to what creatures he could tutor up at this point without just losing the Johnny and the Elspeth on the next swing.
I think that protecting your Elspeth here and hopefully grinding up to an Elspeth Ultimate is really the only way it's going to get you back in the game from a 28-point life deficit like this.
Yeah.
It's just like big flying monsters made by Elspeth. That is a Bioblight.
Bioblight being an amazing play here.
Yeah.
I think Farney was holding on to that one for a while, just waiting for the right time to use it, and he definitely found the right time to use it. So.
Oh, that's a good play. That's a heads-up play. Said I'm going. He heroes downfalled his own creature to fizzle the Bioblight.
Yeah, so Farney had to target one of the tokens with Bioblight, and in response, Russell just decided to go ahead and kill it so he could keep the other 2 tokens on the board.
And without a target, it fizzles. Now it's you're fighting a down and dirty guerrilla fight at that point when that's your play. But it certainly is a line to keep Elspeth alive another turn. And I think every turn you get to be Elspeth alive is a triumph at this point because that is your game plan.
That was a good response from Russell. You know, I would say a handful of players that would just miss that opportunity altogether and realize it after the fact. That was definitely a good catch by Russell.
Now, Farney has just whipped out a Hornet Queen.
Yeah, we saw how powerful Hornet Queen was in round 1 when it was being straight up cast.
And here's another Bioblight.
And I gotta say, Farney's looking pretty good here at this point.
Yeah, I agree.
Whipping out a Hornet Queen is probably...
Well, he's putting his opponent down to, looks like, well, he attacked a Johnny off. Okay. So I can keep Elspeth under control as long as there's no Johnny to pump the tokens.
Exactly.
And I think that's a pretty reasonable line to take there.
Yeah, so we're... the life point variance has gone up significantly.
Yes.
So Farney's now at 43 and Russell being at 9 still.
34-point life deficit. And you just got to start wondering, Russell's playing a mid-range deck, right? By definition, his spells only get so big. What does he have that can get him out of Doom Blast?
You know, it kind of feels like Farney's. You know, obviously it's not a combo deck, but you know, the synergy that is built into this delve mechanic, and being able to do the things he's done with Whip and Sidisi and bringing back a Hornet Queen, etc., etc.
That is a Wingmate Rock with no
raid trigger.
Just needs to get bodies on the table.
Yeah. I believe Air Elemental is almost better than an unrated Wingmate Rock. So you do get the life gain.
Activate Whip.
So
there's the Doomwake Giant. We've known about that one for a while. Clear those tokens off. Looks like we're going to get Elspeth out of here this turn.
We have an enchantment to follow that up with and trigger it again and just knock out that Wingmate Rock. It's -2, right?
It's -1, -1.
So okay, that's my mistake. That's my mistake.
All right. No, he attacks in, even with the block, said, I have seen enough.
Yep. I am done with this game.
And, you know, that's certainly an example of a deck that can go over the top of a Siege Rhino. It's like, well, you have 1, 4, 5, that's great. Like, this is my whip of arrows.
I'm going to whip out a Hornet Queen.
Now, I'd be surprised if Russell had a dedicated sideboard cards for this specific iteration of a delve deck, but certainly the delve mechanic, you know, this style of deck generally is a pretty well known.
Yeah, I felt like Farney was in pretty good shape the entire game, but the turn I was most impressed with was the Doomwake Giant Murderous Cut.
Yeah.
You know, that turn got rid of some crucial creatures on Russell's side and took care of that Siege Rhino that was causing Farney a little bit of heartburn.
Absolutely.
And he was able to just kind of turn the corner there and
and really never looked back. From
Exactly.
that point.
Yeah.
Russell was on the back foot pretty
You
much.
know, even
consistently
even
going
you know,
on.
like you said, when you can untap with an Elspeth and not be in good shape,
Yeah,
your opponent's doing some damage to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the bad news for Russell is that Farney almost certainly has dedicated sideboard slots for this Abzan mid-range deck. I don't know what necessarily is going to bring in. I wouldn't be stunned to see some Despises.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think going up to 4 murderous cuts is probably not the worst thing in the world, because I think your biggest problem is Siege Rhino, and
and then the Planeswalkers.
Of course, the Planeswalker. So he's probably got some number heroes downfall.
Yep. And again, maybe some. I think Despise is a really good card in this format that is defined almost entirely by creatures and Planeswalkers.
Yep.
And
fairly bad against your more aggressive decks, just because, I mean, it does take a threat out of their hand, but there's better things you could probably be doing on turn 1 and 2.
Right, it's really bad against the Jeskai decks, for example, that are creature light and spell heavy.
Yeah.
That's a kind of a rarity.
But when you get into these heavy creature, heavy Planeswalkers decks, Despise is an amazing turn 1 play if you're not doing anything else.
I was researching the format, and I think that one of the things that really jumped out at me as something that was true is one of the things that control decks are struggling with right now is the mid-range decks almost exclusively have a mixture of really powerful creatures and really powerful Planeswalkers, and there's very few spells that deal with both. You have Hero's Downfall, but if they play Nissa, animate a land, and you have 1 Hero's Downfall in your hand, you're still losing. That's still losing proposition. But a card like Despise can break up,
Right, and it does it for very, just a single mana.
Absolutely. I also like Nullify, some of the blue control that's starting to play in the main deck. I like that a lot. So I know this is going to be a really creature-heavy format. Let's play Counterspell, like just actual Counterspell. Oh, Farney, the blue in Farney's deck opens up to having Disdainful Stroke also, which could be. I think that card is really good.
Counter-target Planeswalker.
Yeah, and Siege Rhino.
Exactly.
All the good cards, the really powerful cards, the payoff cards of being Abzan in Russell's decks, the Elspeths, the Ajani's. The Siege Rhinos, all that, the Wingmate Rocks, all that stuff just gets destroyed.
I think one of the big things, too, out of Farney's deck is, they could go, punch for punch for several turns of the game. But once Farney casts that Treasure Cruise, he's able to just go up so many cards that it's going to be really hard for Russell to kind of bounce back from that without any kind of card advantage himself.
That is a really good point. And that's definitely a strategy we've seen be very successful in a lot of the Eternal formats, is my deck is full of 1/4 removal spells and efficient card draw. That's a classic control paradigm that we haven't really seen in Standard, with the exception of Sixth Revelation.
Right,
in a while.
Yeah.
They've been really giving us less powerful card draw spells to work with. Every once in a while, one sneaks through, and you get a format that's completely defined by it.
Yeah, so you had the completely broken environment of Jace the Mind Sculptor, and then they backed off of any kind of relevant blue
and
draw
Ponder
spell.
was in that format too.
Exactly,
like, ridiculous.
Let's not travel back that far in time, because we don't want to upset any viewers we have that might have played during that time.
That was a dark day. Oh man, Ponder. Ponder I think was really the real problem in that format. It made the blue decks sideboard so much better, play so much smoother. I mean, that's a card that is just an incredibly powerful format in every format that it's legal in.
Yeah, and you had something like Stoneforge Mystic that was able to, come down early and present a relevant threat, early, and it was still a good top deck late in the game. And it's hard to find creatures like that anymore that are that powerful. At 2 mana.
The whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, even to the point where it was preemptively banned in Modern.
So this is an interesting format with a ton of powerful card drawing options. So we'll see how that shakes out. You have Dig Through Time, you have Treasure Cruise, you have Jace's Ingenuity, which is no slouch.
Yeah, I'm wondering, just kind of doing a little theory crafting here, what Farney's justification was. I'm sure he has a good one. He's a very good deck builder. I'm just curious as to why he chose Treasure Cruise over Dig Through Time.
Absolutely.
Given that Dig Through Time is able to find cards that are specific to a certain situation, whereas Treasure Cruise is just whatever's on the top of your library. So, be interested to hear what he has to say about that after the fact.
So that's a Caryatid. No play yet from Russell. And here we can see what we were talking about earlier in the previous rounds, where, like the Mono Red Heroic deck, if you're playing Mono Red Heroic against Russell's draw right now, like, he's dead.
Right.
He hasn't played a spell yet, and you just
Yep.
can't do that against these fast mono red decks.
Right. There's a good chance he could have a removal spell, but when you've got a Courser on the other side of the board, or,
Yeah.
excuse me, a Sylvan Caryatid, it doesn't really matter.
Yep. So we get the dredge engine going. We see a little gas. There's a whip there, so the creatures he just hit, which look like a Horniqueen and a Sidisi, are potentially very, very intimidating.
And we're going to do a little more milling.
Is that a Reclamation Sage? The very top card of the library there?
I believe so. I believe so.
Yeah. Bringing that in, possibly it destroys opposing coursers. It's a preemptive measure against if you're worried about banishing light for your whip.
I'm not sure what else it would be good against in this matchup. Courser obviously being a big one. You know, if you can answer their Courser with a Reclamation Stage, you're in good shape.
You get to hit Courser and then have a little bit of a catch-all. Probably not very many of them in the deck, but it's a good whip target, I suppose. Looks like we're gonna do some whipping right here. Looking like we're reaching for Hornet
Sidisi?
Queen. Nope. No, that's Sidisi. Yep, you're right.
Yep, we got a Sidisi.
So with the trigger on the stack, we're going to kill Sidisi. So the mill still happens.
And I believe we've just milled a Horniqueen.
Yeah. So if you kill Sidisi with the trigger on the stack, the mill still will happen, but you don't get a the zombie. So Farney's engine is completely online at this point. He has whip. He's got a stocked graveyard, and Russell has not been able to really muster up much of a game plan yet. You gotta think he's wishing he had Tormod's Crypt.
Yeah.
Yep. Horniqueen whipped into play. Russell looking not wild about that happening.
We got to imagine Russell has something on his side, or
sure.
some
he's got
tricks
a
up
grip
his sleeve.
full of cards.
Full grip. Maybe struggling a little bit on mana.
Yeah, well, definitely that is definitely true. It's possible he just has like a bunch of like Siege Rhino, Wingmade Rock, Elspeth kind of draw, right? Where he was hoping that
he didn't have the Caryatid to back it up, or maybe
Farney's deck
missed
isn't particularly fast, so you just hope for a really powerful high end. Oh, we have Bile Blight for the. Oh, is that Bile Blight? It's Bile Blight.
Yep.
Cleans up the tokens.
Horniqueen tokens.
It's effective. That made Horniqueen just a two mana or a 2 damage, gain 2 life.
Looks like we're seeing a Windswept Heap from Russell. So now that he's got
4.
4 mana, potentially he could we get some relevant threat on the board.
Absolutely.
Potentially a Siege Rhino, or I don't know, the Storm would be all that great here, but it would still be something.
It'd be something for sure.
So.
Get on the board, stem the bleeding a little bit, and hopefully your powerful, potentially game-ending bombs can kind of come online before Farney has a chance to really hit something else spicy.
Now, given what we're seeing out of Russell's deck, do you think it's possible that he could have a turn 5 end hostilities? To
that is
utter end.
An utter end for the whip. I feel like Farney was indicating by his action there that he may have had a disdainful stroke or a negate in his hand or something and tapped too low to cast it. Now Farney doesn't have a lot of action.
Still has a relatively good number of cards in his hands. Looks like he's got 6 or 7 there. So.
Yeah, and a stocked graveyard and plenty of guys. And there's another whip. So that is a good way to recover.
So it looks like what we're seeing from Farney's deck is pretty much just a self-mill whip strategy.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
I really like what I'm seeing from it so far. It's got a lot of good synergy to it, and it's playing out really well.
And you have your Nyx Weavers, which I know in the previous self-mill decks existed so that if you milled your whips, you could sack that and get your whip back. They can tutor out of the graveyard.
Very, very good strategy.
So it's a way to play kind of more whips as you start dredging through your deck.
You don't mind dredging them. It actually might even be better to dredge them just because you can get them back. So
yeah.
And there we have.
There's Siege Rhino.
The ubiquitous Siege Rhino.
I feel like if Farney had not had that second whip, that Siege Rhino could have been really, really effective on this board. Even just a couple of turns to get some pressure on.
Yeah.
But it might just be that whip just outclasses it. I mean,
Yeah,
besides the fact that Farney did, in fact, have the removal spell for it, the Murderous Cut.
I feel like this game's been a little bit one-sided in Farney's favor, primarily just because of Russell's lack of mana production.
Yeah,
he's not been able to keep keep pace with Farney's land drops, and I think that's really hurting him in the long run, especially there after doing the Utter End. If he could have followed that up with a solid 5-drop, he might have been able to put himself back in this game.
I agree. And he gave Farney a ton of time to sculpt and set up without having to defend, without having to commit any resources to defend.
Yeah, zero pressure.
Yeah.
Zero pressure.
It's an unfortunate time to miss a land drop, and he still hasn't hit a fifth land, excuse me.
Yeah, so we had the Utter End on 4, which was actually, I think, like turn 6.
Yeah.
And then he didn't follow it up with land number 5 to do anything relevant. So we got the 5th land now. We'll see if he's got a 5-drop that can actually turn this game around in his favor.
If he could have curved the Rhino into a Wingmate Rock, we could have seen some starting to really pull away.
I would love to see an in-stock hostilities here. I got to say he's probably not running it given the amount of creatures in his deck, but it would help out quite a bit. But you still have the problem with the whip. The whip's going to be generating card advantage every turn.
Exactly. We don't have like Albs that have to whip back anymore.
Yep, but... no tricks. No trick. I think there's like one combo with it in standard, but I don't think it's a good enough one. So
I like Liliana quite a bit, as we've discussed. It's a fog. Well, Liliana, her minus is you search your library for any card, put it on top. It's a minus -2, I believe. And then her +1 is target player discards a card.
No, I believe this was Liliana of the Dark Realms, not Liliana Vess. Actually, Liliana of the Dark Realms is not even legal at this point, is it?
Yeah, no, it's not.
Sorry,
it's Liliana Vess.
Sorry, I get my Lilianas wrong. But, generally there's only one Liliana I care about, and the rest of them are just, additional Lilianas. So.
This is a good one, though. Really underrated for a long time in Standard. And I think this is the kind of format where she can really shine. You look at it here, she's going to search up any card, and then Farney either has to kill her or let Russell search up another card. So it's a Vampiric Tutor with a Fog attached.
Yep. That's actually a good way to look at it. For 5 mana, you get a Vampiric Tutor, and you get a Fog your opponent.
Yeah. So it's basically like a double Vampiric Tutor, as long as you were planning on searching up a Fog anyway. That's like a lot of times that's almost worth a card.
Yeah.
So, and her +1 is actually pretty powerful. When you think of how powerful Liliana of the Veils +1 is, this one's not symmetrical.
Yeah, I just, I've never been a huge fan of Liliana the Vest. I was a big fan of all the Planeswalkers in Lorwyn, and I never really cared for it. And I got to think, in these colors, Abzan colors, is there a better Planeswalker he could be running in that spot?
Well,
it's given on the number of Planeswalkers in those colors.
It's almost certainly a one of, and it's certainly a big part of what Liliana does in this deck is search up the other Planeswalkers.
Okay.
Right,
okay.
it's on curve to search up Elspeth.
Okay.
Rather than playing an additional Elspeth, you can play Liliana and this one out.
There's the end hostilities.
There's an end hostilities. Card we were wondering if he had.
And he did, in fact, have it, and I'm assuming that's what he tutored up with Liliana.
So you can see the power of it.
Yeah.
Especially now, imagine that Farney didn't have a way to get Liliana off the table there, and you could end hostilities and untap Liliana and play a really powerful effect.
That brings me back to the old days of Lorwyn Future Sight, where you would cast Liliana and tutor up Damnation and just, take the game from there. So
now,
that's what we saw. So Liliana's still doing her thing, all these years later.
Whip is going to be a thing.
Whip's still a problem. We haven't solved that problem yet, so it needs another Utter End or, another way to remove the Whip of Erebos.
That was a whip for a Wayfinder to mill more cards.
Right.
To find more whip targets, which is just the best. Doomwig Giant for no value, just a big body and the potential to generate value later. Doomwig Giant, another source of card advantage in this deck, another engine for the card advantage in this deck.
Yep.
And some of the decks that play Doomwig Giant play Eidolon Blossoms, and this deck basically is playing Whip in that 4-drop slot.
Yep.
And it's really hard after seeing it in action for me to justify playing anything but Whip in
Yeah,
that slot in a
Whip,
deck like this one.
Whip's been dominating these games.
It's been really impressive.
So I'm interested to see what Whip is able to do to finish this game off, given that that's Farney's main game plan right here, depending on anything else he might have in his hand.
So, 3 mana, probably not going to be a game breaker. Could be a removal spell for the Doomwake Giant. It's a Courser. That's a reasonable card. Can't quite make that one out. It's caught in a little bit of glare.
It's like a...
It's a Bioblight.
Yeah.
Okay, alternate art Bioblight. Don't want it. Doesn't do anything.
Seed Rhino.
Seed Rhino a little bit better. I imagine we'd be happy to draw that one. Man, Siege Rhino does a lot of work when we talked about earlier turning the corner. Siege Rhino lets you go from being under the gun to getting out of range and then hurting your opponent enough to get in range of your finishers, but it's hard to do that when your opponent's at 34 life.
Looks like we just whipped back a Sidisi, and we're going to go ahead and mill 3 and generate a zombie token.
Yep.
And we're going to trigger it again on the attack and potentially... Oh,
nope.
that one's a whiff. But actually, though, that's not bad for Farney because it gets those 3 lands out of the way.
And he
obviously does not need any more.
He has another Doomwake Giant in his hand, it looks like. Oh, Murderous Cut.
Going to take care of the Courser Crew Fix. Yeah, I actually liked what Sidisi did there, even though you don't see the presence on the board, but it frees up Farney's next draw to not draw one of those 3 lands, which is actually very, very relevant.
It's kind of like Goblin Ringleader in the Goblins deck in Legacy. Despite a lot of popular opinion, Goblin Ringleader never bricks because it either finds you goblins or puts 4 lands you don't want on the bottom of your library.
Because those are your only 2 options.
Yep.
And I gotta say,
Russell is at 1. We know that his card he drew for the turn was a Siege Rhino. I don't see that being a ton of help.
It might buy him a turn. It is going to knock Farney down to 38.
And there we see a really sweet one, I think, out of Matt Farney.
Yeah, great decks today. We got to see the Saltai deck earlier that was doing some cool things with Easter Spouts. And
Farney had 2 Heroes Downfalls, another Doomwake Giant in his hand.
When you're playing a deck and your main game plan, or at least what we saw, is mill yourself and use Whip to play your entire game, he's not casting cards out of his hand at that point. So he's got all those cards in his hand just generating over the course of the game that just take care of any threats that come down, generate additional card advantage through milling and whipping.
Yep.
So
I really like the fact that in this deck, Whip not only puts pressure on your opponent, but it basically draws a card worth of value every time you activate it. It's either Doomwake Giant, which is removing creatures. It's Sidisi, which is leaving creatures behind. It's Horniqueen, leaving creatures behind.
It's essentially that Whip being on the board and him being able to mill cards into his graveyard before he casts Whip. It essentially turns Whip into his hand.
Yeah.
And then his actual hand he can use to either generate more card advantage or take care of creatures or treasure cruise as we saw in game 1.
Yeah, very cool.
So, some very interesting things going on here.
I'm going to say we didn't see the most explosive draws out of Russell's deck.
No, the deck has the capability to, and it looks like he was definitely higher on the Planeswalker curve than we've seen some of the Fleece main. And
yeah, exactly. Definitely the going bigger, definitely more of the Argilax Pro Tour style list.
And we may have actually found a decent trump for Argilax's list, a Whip of Variables, self-build deck.
Small sample size, but I was certainly impressed by what Farney's deck could do with its engine for sure. And there's not a ton of ways to disrupt it with good value in the format, being one of the very few. And even that, it's not a card you're excited to have to play.
And given the ability to, even if you don't get your engine online early, it's kind of like, how Bitter Blossom works in Fairies and Modern. You don't always have to have it on turn 2. Even if you draw Bitter Blossom later in the game, it still helps the deck. It helps glue the pieces of the deck together. And you can do the same thing. It looked like from Farney's deck, with Nyx Weaver. If you don't get the Whip out early, it hits your graveyard. You can get it back later in the game and still start generating a card advantage to just kind of take over.
Absolutely. No, good stuff. Good matches. Definitely be sure to check us out. Round 5 coming up. We'll see what the final standings are looking like. A lot of the players that are undefeated will probably like to draw.
Yeah, yeah.
There's definitely good value in that, but
I
we'll
would I
see.
would enjoy seeing Farney's deck in round 5. How about
Yeah,
you?
I would certainly like to see that again. I wouldn't mind seeing some of that villainous wealth
Mm.
deck that we saw earlier again. So
But-
we'll take a look. We'll find a sweet one definitely for round 5, and then move on to a little modern action
Yeah,
as a
yeah,
bonus at the
yeah.
end of the
Stay
night.
tuned. We'll be back in round 5.
All right,
Thank
thanks,
you.
guys.